Hello, everyone, and welcome to United Way. Live United. I'm Terry Westerfield. And joining me today, I have Mary Claire Landry. Mary Claire is the Executive Director at New Orleans Family Justice Center. Welcome to the program, Mary Claire.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, we're here today to discuss a very, very serious subject, and it is domestic violence. Right now, there is a package of bills that would be just a sweeping reform for some of those laws we have on the books regarding domestic abuse, domestic violence, and that this week they're going to be heard in both the Senate and House committees. Mary Claire, I'm hoping we can just stop for a second and let's lay the groundwork. Let's tell people why this is so important. We know it's horrible what happens to women, children, and men, but when people hear this, or listen to this, our audience here, Louisiana consistently leads the nation in domestic homicides and has done so since 1997. That is another one of those, we're number one, and we certainly don't want to be.
That's absolutely right. And for even longer than that, we've been in the top 5. And so we know that we need to do a better job and we need to address domestic violence and really stop it at the instant it begins. We really need to do early intervention. And that's why we've created the Family Justice Center, which is a one-stop shop. We have prosecution on site. We have the police on site. It's really a collaborative response to domestic violence. So a victim comes to one place and get safety, and at the same time we're addressing batterer accountability. So it's that twofold approach, and it's just been really successful in Orleans Parish in reducing. We've seen about a 35% reduction in Orleans Parish, but the state as a whole still continues to have massive issues and just out of control murder rates, and something that we really need to resolve across the state. So we've been thrilled that United Way, the Women's Leadership Council, and a whole range of women's organizations and groups have joined us to really do the most comprehensive strategy to, across the board in terms of how we can start to address this in a more comprehensive way.
Well, and when you talk about that, a comprehensive way, I always look at what you do. You're a model for what could be and should be perhaps across the state.
Right.
And do people come in from, say, Shreveport or Alexandria or others? And I know there is a coalition. I know that you're all involved in so many of these different, you come together because this is a common cause. Do you exchange ideas? Do you learn from each other?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there is a lot of interest in the state. We've had a lot of conversations with the State Department of Children and Family Services, who is our primary funder, as well as Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement. And actually, we're in the process of doing some technical assistance with the Alexandria region because we did lose a major shelter there. And so there is going to be another Family Justice Center opening in probably the next month or so. There's also one in Monroe, and we're very fortunate. We just received some funding from Baptist Community Ministries to create the Regional Training Center, which is going to allow us to really do that kind of technical assistance, because it absolutely, it doesn't replace shelters, it doesn't replace services, but what it does is it really helps a community to really look at a collaborative approach to domestic violence. This is not just something that the shelters can take or the DV advocates. This is something that the whole community, the criminal justice system, the police, law enforcement, everybody needs to really be in concert together to really keep survivors safe and also address the issues related to the batterers.
And that is where the challenge comes in, because if all the pieces don't fit together, you're doing what you need to be doing. Someone else is over here, but then someone else perhaps isn't, or because the laws aren't on the books, the next thing you know, that abuser is out, maybe even before the woman or whomever has been victimized.
That's correct.
And then, wow, he or she can get right back to the person they have just abused.
Well, and it's like anything, when you're functioning in silos and you don't know what the other part of the community is doing, you really are less effective. And we do know that, you're dealing with families in crisis, and so they don't always trust the systems that they have to deal with. They're often overwhelmed in terms of, when survivors call 911, they don't always realize that they're getting involved with the criminal justice system. They don't know what that means. They just want it to stop that night. And so what we do is help facilitate the process in terms of helping them understand what their legal options are, what may happen to the batterer, if she's appropriate to go for a civil restraining order. I mean, there's lots of legal remedies, but they're complicated, and they need professional help to navigate through that. This is someone who's in crisis, doesn't know where to go. And what we found across the country, not just here, is that women may have to go to 10, 15 places to get all of these different services. And as we know, anybody who's in crisis, you probably aren't even going to make it past the first one. So we have to make it easy, and we have to make it convenient for them so that when they come in and they're overwhelmed, they can really feel like they can get everything that they need in one place. And survivors tell us all the time, what took you so long? We had a woman that came in that experienced abuse many years ago, and she said, I just couldn't even imagine if something like this happened, was available for me when this happened to me. She said, this is amazing. I mean, we just have to be better at coordinating all of the systems. It truly takes a village in these situations. They're very complicated. You have the children who are, and we have to think of something other than just always having the survivor have to leave. We want to really make options available so that she can stay in the community. The kids can stay in the community where they feel safe, where they can get support. And so just leaving and hiding away is not always the answer. So we need a whole range of answers that are going to address these issues.
You're saying whole range. It's almost holistic approach.
Holistic approach, and that's why we need all of these laws, and that's why there's a whole range of laws, from the civil protective orders, from divorces, from the criminal code, so that we're making sure that we're really addressing and have sufficient legal response and significant enough response to a domestic violence situation, so that batterers understand that we take this, our community takes this very seriously, and there are going to be serious consequences if we're just, tapping them on the hand and say, just don't do that anymore. We know that the battering situation is not going to stop just with that. So we really need the arm of the law in those situations where we really need the law enforcement to really be the response that's going to keep the victim safe.
On shows like this before, and having talked with guests who are friends who are psychologists or psychiatrists, they put abuse, battery, into one of those categories where they say it's a learned behavior often. Mm-hmm. It's a cultural thing. If you see it as a child and your father, or whoever the male figure was, or if it was the mother who was abusing a child, they see that's what they know, and that's then correct. It's another one of those things that comes under, we have to break the cycle. Because
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think that's what people think if they think a man hitting the woman. Well, it could be a woman hitting a child. There's so many different variations. The bottom line is whoever is being abused is being hurt, and that whole family is being hurt. And we see and we hear about the ripple effects.
Right.
How just many thousands upon thousands actually are just crushed by the emotional and physical abuse. In fact, some of the figures, I wanted to put this out again because this was amazing to me. Now, and again, I know you are quite familiar and you all work together, and this is with the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Abuse, and that's Beth Meeks and her folks. Well, they've joined forces along with you from the Family Justice Center and Yanaway Sela in proposing these package of bills. Now, LCADV says that they have been tracking these domestic homicides, and they say from 2010 through 2012, there were 178 deaths due to domestic violence. That's here. 74% of these were committed with firearms, and 37% of the offenders had a prior history of domestic violence or other violent crimes. And here's the part again where it's just, there were 16 multiple victim incidents resulting in 35 deaths, practically all of which were committed with firearms. And the murder rate of women in Louisiana most recently measured at 40% higher than the national average and has been twice the national average in recent years. And then, icing on the cake here, these statistics do not take into account that 14% of law enforcement line of duty deaths result from domestic disturbances, and that domestic homicides are the leading cause of death among pregnant women.
That's correct.
It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying.
And I think that the disturbing trend that we're seeing is that, there often are collateral deaths, like this just very tragic situation in Houma right before Christmas, where not only does he take his wife's life, but he takes other family members of the wife. I mean, he's out to really hurt her. And, so we see several deaths related to the domestic violence homicide. And so that's a disturbing trend. And also, we also see the murder, suicides, the killing of the children, killing in the workplace. So, this is very, very disturbing. And we also know from history that this is these types of calls are the most dangerous for police to go, because oftentimes they don't necessarily know that they're going into a violent situation or that the person is armed. And so we really are working to train 911 operators to really make sure that the police have as much information, and with the protective orders to make sure that they're filed properly and expedited as quickly as possible, so that when the police are going to a scene, that they can pull up to see if that person has protective order already issued. So all of these systems have to work. They have to be efficient. They have to, if there's any delay in any of these systems, because oftentimes, in those situations when she's filing a protective order is when she's most in danger, or when she's trying to leave a domestic violence situation. It's almost like the batter sees that the ante is up, and so, they're losing control, and so by God, they're going to regain that control. And so that's why we know that we all have to be working together. We all have to be aware of what's happening, and when we're creating a plan, that everybody is a part of that. And that's what makes this co-located, coordinated system so critically important, because that time frame is just critical in her safety and the family's safety.
I want to come back in a little bit and talk about the laws specifically, those that we're asking to be changed. But for those who are listening today who have joined us, we have had folks on to discuss this topic before, but I receive phone calls now and then. They'll say, wow, I listened to the show. I had no idea that could be me. That could be the pattern I'm falling into. Because obviously it's different for everyone. But it is often a woman who is being victimized, and they don't realize it. It starts out slowly, and it builds, and it's not just something where you're getting sucker punched every day. Right. It's a whole manipulative way in which you approach someone. And maybe we could talk about some of the signs, if you could share, just to watch out for.
Absolutely. And, this is someone that supposedly loves you, right? This is this is an intimate partner relationship. This is not strangers. This is not someone that you don't know. This is someone that you've managed to get emotionally invested and oftentimes have children with. And so we do see these patterns over time. And again, I think as a woman, you've made a commitment to this relationship. You think you can change it, and of course he's giving you constant messages, nobody wants you, it's very often they're isolating her from her friends and her family. There's the self-esteem.
You doubt yourself, it sounds
exactly. And you think you can change them, or you think if you just do something different, the abuse will change. And so it is a very manipulative control types of situation. And oftentimes we know women don't identify themselves as victims of domestic violence. Oftentimes when women come in and they begin to see the patterns, and they really begin to see some of the assessments that we do with them, and really begin to understand the trauma, then it's that they can really begin to understand that, their freedom has been impinged. And so, what we try to tell survivors is, just listen to your gut. If you just don't feel free, if you feel like you're being controlled and manipulated by someone, those are all signs. If he's isolating you and he's controlling what you're wearing or how you wear it or what you cook or where you go and where you go at work, or if he's harassing you at work. All of those are signs that he is, really controlling you. And, and it's very difficult because women are just invested in the relationship. And, and there's a lot of shame and embarrassment related to it, And so, oftentimes women are really afraid, or they just feel embarrassed to tell anybody. We've done focus groups, and a lot of women don't tell anybody. We used to think they tell their beauty, their manicurist, or the person at the beauty parlor, or the preacher. But what we're finding is a lot of women don't really reveal it to anyone, because they're just embarrassed and ashamed, because they've come to believe that it's their fault and that they're just doing something wrong in the relationship.
And Mary Claire, I really want you to address too, because I think too often it's thought of as abuse as being limited to a particular socioeconomic group.
Right.
And this cuts across all age groups, all races, all socioeconomic groups, and anyone can become a victim of domestic abuse.
That's absolutely correct. And it may manifest itself in different ways. Certainly people with money, oftentimes you see the control of the money being the issue. But we see it with physicians, we see it with lawyers, we see it with doctors, we see it, it's not just poor people or any one particular race, or it crosses all socioeconomic. Of course, many of the programs that we provide, when people have resources, then they use resources to, leave the abuse if they can get a divorce, if they can separate, if they have resources to leave and go somewhere else. Having resources does make a difference, and oftentimes they will get private resources to address their domestic violence. But it's certainly as prevalent and as evidenced in all socioeconomic. It's just handled differently, and the options and the resources may look different for the victims. And of course, what we see in Louisiana is that, oftentimes we see the race differential in terms of who's arrested, how the charges are brought on, and who gets out of jail, who's bonded out, so again, if you look at this disparate impact of domestic violence, it certainly has a more harmful effect for those that may have difficulties maintaining jobs, or who are poor and don't really have a lot of resources available to them.
And consequently, again, as you said, that may be one of the reasons the abused, that person or persons, are staying around a little bit longer, especially if it is a woman,
right,
and who doesn't have a particularly strong skill set, thinking that by this time she's been pretty much torn apart psychologically.
Right. Exactly.
So not only is she usually emotionally vulnerable, but here she's been physically hurt as well. Now afraid to leave or seek the kind of help she might need, and worried because she doesn't have the economic wherewithal
right.
to do it, and there could be children involved. We hear over and over and over again, I don't know, I'm staying for the children. But as you were mentioning earlier,
mm-hmm.
that's not doing any good for the children.
Right. Well, what we see is a lot of times survivors really don't. They think that the children are not being exposed to it, or they think the kids don't know or don't hear. But what we know is kids are very, very acute to what's going on, and they're usually aware. And we do know that when children grow up, and, I think culturally we've lived in a society where it's like what happens in the home is private and it's not our business. And so I think what's becoming clearer and clearer is that what happens in the home, if it is negative, is going to be played out on the streets later. And so we do have to be aware of what's going on in the home. And we have to really think about, what power and relationships mean. And, there's just many manifestations of this in terms of, why do men primarily, 85% primarily are men, feel that they need to have that kind of control? What are those dynamics that are playing into this power and control dynamic in our society? And
is it different for each man, each relationship?
I think it is, but I think again it's manifested when someone is out of a job and hasn't been able to provide for his family. I think a lot of times in those situations, it's really the one place he does have control is in the home. I think for those, sometimes it's really manifested by men who just think this woman is my property. I mean, it hasn't been that long in our country that
chattel.
Women were we're chattel and we're defined as chattel. So, I think it's that struggle across the world in terms of equality for both men and women and, equal opportunity across the board.
Mary Claire, and excuse me, I had a little bit of cough here. I want to talk about some of the bills now. Let's kind of get to them because when I have a summary, and these are going to be presented first this coming Tuesday.
Correct.
And that's going to be in the Senate Judiciary Committee with Senator J.P. Morrell. And again, we have to really credit Representative Helena Moreno and J.P. Morrell because they have done so much to move these bills forward. Now, the first one, and these are going to be on the civil side. Now, and guess to say it briefly, the bills before the legislature, these provide an immediate divorce to a victim of domestic violence while safeguarding spousal and child support, eliminating the 180-day waiting period when physical violence escalates following separation. And here's the second part. It further allows the award of exemplary damages for injuries sustained in domestic and family abuse cases. All right, that doesn't seem too difficult to understand, but for many out there right now, I know they are scratching their head just a little bit. So let's get down to it. We're saying that we would like to see the law strengthened and added that if someone has been a victim of this abuse, that there is an opportunity for he or she or the child to collect damages, correct?
Absolutely, and we'd like this to be as quickly as possible. Right now, if your partner commits adultery, you can get immediate divorce. So we're just saying, that equally as important is abuse, and oftentimes we know that if we could separate the parties immediately in those cases where there's clearly a desire for the partners to separate, then that ought to be allowed in the law. So we don't have this contentious relationship over 6 months where they're fighting over the kids, where they're trying to resolve all these issues, when we're really trying to separate them and provide as much separation and ability to move away from the relationship. So we think if adultery is grounds for immediate divorce, then we think battering your partner should also equally be immediate cause for a divorce.
And this is something that we all feel very strong about. I say we, those who are members of the coalition. And I have to make it very clear, for the first time ever, United Way of Southeast Louisiana had established a public policy committee. And our chair is the wonderful Kim Sport, who is an attorney who helped work with some of the verbiage in putting these laws together that are being championed.
And she did a tremendous amount of research and looking at the best practices across the country, and really we found the states that we felt had the most sound and effective policies related to these types of issues. So she did a tremendous amount of research.
And, of course, she's working hand in glove with our wonderful Chief Operating Officer, Charmaine Cassiope, who is a pro when it comes to working around the Capitol and knowing with whom to speak and to try to get the ear of the folks so we can present this information that you, Mary Claire, Beth Meeks, so many have come together and really champion.
Absolutely.
I know that one of the things that we're looking for, too, is not just the civil side, but then the big day this week will be Thursday, and that is March 26th. And it's going to be it's going to start about 9 o'clock, and it could run for quite some time because this is going to be the first hearing of the House Administration of Criminal Justice Committee. And they're going to hear the criminal bills, or the bills on the criminal side.
Right.
And there are a number of them. And we have learned that Judge Bernadette D'Souza, who's with our Civil District Court here in the domestic section, will be testifying along with Representative Moreno, and I know that others. And this is where we're really looking for people to show up. There's going to be a bus, I believe, leaving here and trying to take those supporters up. We're asking others to come because sometimes it truly is to the legislative body to see numbers of
Absolutely.
people. That makes an impact.
Right. Especially when related to the laws that we're proposing that relate to guns. And so, and again, we're trying to get our state legislation to mirror the federal legislation, which says that if you are convicted of a domestic violence, not even homicide, but of a domestic violence felony or misdemeanor, that you are not to possess guns. And the federal law says that you have to, the law enforcement should take the guns away. In our bill, we're just basically saying that if you have a civil protective order or any misdemeanor or felony charge related to domestic violence, that you are not to possess a gun. So we're leaving it up to the perpetrator to get rid of his guns and take responsibility himself for not having a weapon on him. So all this bill does is, if he is involved in a second charge, or if he is caught carrying a gun during this protective order period, or during the time that he's on any kind of probation from the court, that it allows the district attorney to upgrade the charges to say that you are in possession of a firearm when you really should not have that firearm. So we're not going to be confiscating the guns. We're just simply saying that a condition of your bond and a condition of your freedom is contingent upon you not having possession of a firearm. And that's related to the fact that so many of our deaths and domestic violence homicides are definitely related to the availability of guns for perpetrators. And so we're just really trying to make sure that the perpetrator knows that he should not have access and should not have possession of a gun during that time. That's part of the consequences of his behavior in terms of the domestic violence law.
And as you already pointed out, but I want to read again because of Kim Sport, who is the chair of our Public Policy Committee at United Way SELA, feels very strongly about that. And as she said, too, inexplicably, the federal law is recognized in Louisiana's concealed weapon permit statute,
That's
but
correct.
not in Louisiana's unlawful possession of a firearm statute. And Kim says we are simply choosing, or rather closing, a loophole in Louisiana law and creating no greater restriction on the possession of firearms, as you've said, than which already exists for domestic violence perpetrators. And I think it's really interesting to find out that 33 states and the District of Columbia have laws similar to the federal law, which prohibit subjects of domestic violence protective orders from purchasing or possessing firearms.
Right.
And then many states, including California, Illinois, Massachusetts, Texas, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, actually go beyond that federal law by prohibiting firearm purchase or possession by persons who are subject to domestic violence protective orders issued before notice to the abuser. And that's important because that goes back to what we discussed earlier in the show. If everybody is working together,
Right.
then it would be that the person who is most at risk because he or she has been a victim of abuse will know that their abuser is not only perhaps out and about, but has applied for this gun permit.
Right, exactly. And I think it just depends on, do we really want to be serious about this? And do we really want to have consequences for batterers? If you have a domestic violence charge against you, then at the least we should be able to say to them, you cannot possess a firearm. I mean, that's at the very minimum that we should be able to take away their access to guns. And that's really because a lot of these situations are done in a heat of anger and reaction. And so the less chance that he has the opportunity to have possession of a gun, the more opportunity we have to prevent a homicide.
Mary Claire Landry, who is the executive director at New Orleans Family Justice Center. Mary Claire, you're going to have to come back because these bills are going to proceed. We have had a wonderful discussion. We are out of time. I can't believe it. It's gone by that quickly. But please, before we go, give people your web address or a number where they can go to get information.
Yes, we have a 24-hour hotline answered by crisis counselors all the time. So even if you have a question, you don't even have to, give your name. It's all confidential. But please call 866-9554. That's the crisis line. Or you can go to our website, www.nofjc.org. And you can just call to get information.
And likewise, you can go to the UnitedWaySELA.org and click on the advocate button, and you'll learn more about these laws that are coming up. And for United Way, I'm Terry Westerfield. Mary Claire, please join me in saying, Live United.
Live United. Thank
we'll
you,
see
United
next
Way.
week. Thank you.